It is no secret that marriages can be challenging. After all, two people are coming together to try to live their lives in harmony with one another. Unfortunately, sometimes things just don't work out that way. For most people, it can be very difficult to spot where the problem is coming from. For some others, they might clearly identify the sources of these problems, but each party denies to take responsibility. Here are bad habits that will slowly destroy your marriage or relationship. Number 1. False assumptions. Bad habits are like a cancer that slowly eats away at the foundation of a relationship. Over time, they can destroy even the strongest of bonds. One of the most destructive habits in a relationship is making quick or false assumptions. When we make assumptions, we stop listening to what our partner is really saying. We fill in the blanks with our own version of the truth based on our own biases and experiences. This can lead to misunderstandings and even resentment. A vast majority of divorces, breakups, and separations today are often triggered from assumptions. One person feels the other partner did something on purpose. Another thinks his or her partner can never change. Or one person feels the other person cheated when nothing of such really happened. As innocent as it may sound, assumptions can be one of the most destructive traits in a relationship. They usually come because you assume the role of a mind reader. When you assume you know what your partner is thinking or feeling, you might not bother to ask them. This can create an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust. For example, you make a phone call to your partner who doesn't get to answer the call on time because he or she was in the bathroom and didn't get to hear the phone ringing. But instead of thinking they might not have seen it, you immediately assume that they are ignoring your call on purpose. The devil takes advantage of this and begins to make you imagine all sorts. He makes you assume perhaps he or she is cheating, or makes you assume they are ignoring you, when in reality, they just didn't see it. This builds up bitterness and anger in your spirit, to the point that when your partner gets back to you and tries to explain why they couldn't pick up your calls, your mind has already been poisoned and you really don't want to talk to them. James 1:19 says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God." The reality is that sometimes these suspicions could be stemming from your past. You might have been doing those same things you are accusing or suspecting them of. And so your eyes have been tainted to see her as someone who is doing the things you did yourself. Instead of taking responsibility for your own feelings, you begin putting the blame on the other person. This creates a victim mentality, which will only make you feel worse in the long run. In most cases, your partner might be completely innocent of the things you are assuming they are doing. But the devil gives you an entirely different picture, quite opposite to what they were really up to. This causes you to overreact and make the situation bigger than it is. Little by little, it gets to a point where you don't see anything good about them. At this point, the devil begins to put thoughts into your mind to leave them. He gives you all the valid reasons he thinks your partner is unfaithful. He tells you, if she really loves you, why didn't she pick up her phone on time? Why did it take so long for her to reply your message? All these thoughts are birthed because you have given room for the enemy to come in and poison your mind. And because your mind has been poisoned, you don't give your partner any room to explain themselves, because you have already made up your mind. Not only is this a selfish habit, but it is also a judgmental attitude. Instead of trying to understand them, you're choosing to believe that you already know what happened when you clearly don't. This creates distance in the relationship and makes it harder to trust each other. If you don't change from the bad habit of making quick assumptions, you might go through your whole life never being able to have a stable relationship, because your mind is intoxicated. Number 2, the fault-finding spirit. One of the biggest problems in marriages is when one spouse is constantly putting the other spouse down. This can be in the form of criticizing, nagging, or just generally being negative. A fault-finding spirit is when you're always looking for something wrong with your partner. This habit is destructive for 2 reasons. First, it creates an atmosphere of negativity. If you're always looking for something to criticize, you can always find something bad if you look for it. Some faults, some weakness, something that will make them look bad. Secondly, focusing on your partner's faults shows a lack of respect. It communicates that you don't think they're good enough as they are, and that you don't value them. If you're constantly picking at your partner, they're eventually going to get fed up and start feeling like they can never meet your expectations. If you have a fault-finding spirit, it's important to try to change your perspective. Instead of always looking for something to criticize, try to focus on the positive. If you have a fault-finding spirit, most likely it is not your partner that has a real issue. Most likely the real issue is from you. This type of behavior might have been triggered from your past, or just a habit you have adopted over time. The sad part about this is, when you are a fault finder in your relationship, there will never be anyone good enough for you. Even if God sent you an angel from heaven, you will still find something faulty. You will always find faults, even with the most nicest of people on the planet. If you have had a history of continuously breaking up with people, this might be a clear signal you have an unresolved issue you need to deal with. Sure, there's nothing wrong in correcting or pointing out something you thought could be better. But it should not become routine to the point where you never seem to see anything good they do. No one likes to be told they're not good enough, and it's even more hurtful coming from the person you're supposed to love. Number 3. Unsupportive attitude. One bad habit that can slowly destroy your marriage or relationship is unsupportive behavior. Let's think about it. Imagine a housewife who has only just given birth to a newborn baby. She wakes up in the middle of the night to feed her child, meaning she hasn't had enough sleep. In the morning, this same woman wakes up to make breakfast for her family. Not only that, but she also has to take her children to school, after which she then rushes off to work. At the end of her workday, she rushes back to childcare to pick up her kids and then heads to the store to buy food for dinner. This poor woman arrives home tired and exhausted. All throughout, her husband is watching football in the living room. He then walks up to her and begins to yell at her for not putting his clothes in the washing machine. Believe it or not, nothing breaks a woman down much more than a man who doesn't show appreciation or support for all of her hard work. Not to talk of a man who takes her for granted, especially after everything she's been through during the course of the day. Yes, she may be your wife, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't deserve a thank you every now and then. She feels used and undervalued by her husband, and all she really needs is for him to see how much weight she's carrying every day. Women aren't designed to fill your role or bear the weight of your entire family by themselves. They were designed by God to be a support system. If you're not able to offer her help in a given scenario, the best thing you can do is at least acknowledge and appreciate the work she does. Thank you is a phrase that can make a big difference in a marriage. If more couples were open to appreciating each other's efforts, there would be less fighting in homes. The truth of the matter is this. Most women nag not because they hate you as their spouse, but it's usually because they feel frustrated trying to do everything by themselves. They've been trying so hard to communicate this message to you, and you just haven't been listening. This is known as stonewalling. The pressure and frustration of trying to express herself over time is what leads to her venting behavior, which comes in the form of nagging. It is important that when your wife or partner is showing signs of frustration, focus on the message they are trying to convey rather than the method of delivery. Sometimes you escalate matters and make it worse because you are focusing on her mode of delivery rather than the message. Instead of seeing past her nagging tone and trying to understand the real reason behind her venting, most couples, especially men, become emotional and begin to focus on demanding for respect. This results in an angry husband who lashes out at his wife without actually understanding the message she was trying to get across this whole time. This only leads to a never-ending cycle of pains and bitterness within the home. For there to be a change, someone has to begin the change process. This change could begin by someone listening. In most cases, it is the unwillingness to begin the change that leads to prolonged arguments. As the leader of your home, you must be willing to lay down your ego and humble yourself to support your wife and family. So there you have it. Thank you for watching. If you love our videos, please feel free to subscribe to our channel.